During a joint press conference with Theresa May in London, Donald Trump was asked about the protests against him in London. There have been thousands of protesters who have taken to the streets to protest against him. And of course, Trump did not miss this opportunity to show the world just how delusional he is. Take a look.
As far as the protests, I have to tell you, because I commented on it yesterday, we left the Prime Minister, the Queen, the royal family. There were thousands of people on the streets cheering. And even coming over today, there were thousands of people cheering. And then I heard that there were protests. I said, where are the protests? I don't see any protests. I did see a small protest today when I came, very small. So a lot of it is fake news, I hate to say. But you saw the people waving the American flag, waving your flag. It was tremendous spirit and love. There was great love. It was an alliance. And I didn't see the protesters until just a little while ago, and it was a very, very small group of people put in for political reasons. So it was fake news. Thank you.
I just want to show everybody the kind of love that was taking place on the streets of London for Donald Trump. So what you could probably hear them chanting there was Nazi scum, and they have basically completely surrounded, completely surrounded a few pro-Trump protesters. So there was a small group of pro-Trump protesters. Things got a little heated because there were tens of thousands of anti-Trump protesters. And when they had encircled them, of course, the cops got there to protect the pro-Trump protesters. In fact, they were immediately escorted into some sort of shop so they wouldn't get hurt or whatever. I mean, it didn't seem like anyone was actually gonna try to harm them, but just in case, it was best for them to get out of that situation because things can get heated, obviously. But anyway, there were protests. There's very clearly protests. In fact, The Independent, which is a publication in the area, says tens of thousands of demonstrators take to the streets of London to raise their voices against President Trump and his divisive policies on immigration, climate change, and women's rights during the 3-day state visit to the UK.
I want to, just really point out how infuriated and ready to go the British citizens are around this issue, and how people in the UK, I've been there several times since Brexit and also since Trump's election. People out there are really aggressively ready to protest. They are very angry about what happened. They understood that they've been conned and let down, both by Brexit and by the elections of folks like Trump. And there's a lot of courage out there to stand up and say this is enough. And I think that's why we see Brexit imploding in front of our eyes. But I do also want to make one other point, that though I think Trump speaking about everything that defies his very limited worldview as fake news is delusional, it also works really well with the way social media function. And this is something we've talked about before, Anna. When you sort of claim something as fake news and you put it online, you put it onto Twitter, you put it onto Facebook, what have you, it creates these two different worlds. One world where all the fans and people who not even like Trump, but people who dislike the protests and dislike liberalism, dislike the liberals, dislike progressives, get all riled up and say, yeah, it's fake news, it's fake news, it's fake news. And the algorithms reinforce the visibility of that. But then those like us who say this is ridiculous, we're stuck in our own bubbles and these algorithms are fueling that visibility. So actually this fake news stuff is a very specific, I don't know if it's an intentional strategy, but in a lot of ways it works to his advantage.
To your point, it's interesting because I try to logically look at that guy and go, maybe there's something going on in his head. Like either logically speaking, these protests I heard were smaller than the last protest, but there were still a lot of people. It was like 75,000 people. So I was saying logically, maybe he's thinking to himself, oh, well, there's less than before, so it's not that bad. Or logically speaking, maybe they pulled the USS McCain and the motorcade went another block where there's like a couple of Nazi supporters, and logically speaking is like, oh, I had supporters. Or more to the point, like you were saying, this guy is an amazing spin artist. Like he would be a great publicist. Like he should have a PR agency. It's like it's almost like he and Kellyanne, like he's like the Emperor and Kellyanne Conway's Darth Vader. You know what I'm saying? Like he's
and the architect behind it all is Steve Bannon, who's brilliant when it comes to these issues and understood the media climate and the internet climate and saw Trump as someone who could be the face of this spin.
Well, he's been doing this since he got himself on the Forbes list back in the day. When you watch that documentary on Netflix where he's calling the reporter, pretending to be some guy named Barron something, which by the way his son is named Barron. He was pretending to be named John Barron, going, "Oh yeah, I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Trump. Yeah, his worth is this much." So he was spinning back then. He's been spinning his whole life.
The one thing that, and Cenk I think he gets irritated when I bring this up, but because Cenk believes that there's never any strategy with Trump. There is no genius or intellect or anything when it comes to Trump. But he does have one skill, and that skill is marketing. He is a shameless self-promoter, and I would argue that is a skill. It's a skill that I don't have. I can't stand it. I can't do it. And his shamelessness, his relentlessness, and his persistence in self-promoting has really worked to his advantage. And I think that right now is a really great era for psychologists to study just the way humans behave around strongmen. Because the point that was just made about Kellyanne Conway and all the yes men that surround him, I mean, why? Why? Yes, there's that obsession with power, but think about how miserable you have to be working in this administration. You know, like even if you're power hungry, being surrounded by all these people, all of these, like the multiple investigations, how many people have been sentenced to prison because of their involvement with Trump or because they're bad people, aside from, being involved from Trump. I mean, it's just over and over again, you keep hearing these stories about how miserable people are, but they just keep protecting him.
Well, it goes to Ramesh's point. They believe the spin, and they believe, like you said, that they're the ones who go, "Oh yeah, fake news, fake news, fake." It's like you're in a cult.
You think they believe it though?
It's like they're in a cult. I honestly feel that if you were to deprogram them, take them out, and really because if you think back before when Trump first started, a lot of these people that are working with him now were highly critical, going, "This guy's an idiot. He'll never be president. What the hell is he?" Now he became president.
Like
all
Lindsey
of a sudden,
Graham.
and then they spun. So it's a cult thing.
Yeah, in psychology, there's a term that we use called confirmation bias. It doesn't necessarily mean that you believe it as it's actually true, but if you're already angry about the world outside of you, and this person gives voice to that, you're ready to, believe the unbelievable, right?
I mean, I am curious if members of his administration actually believe the unbelievable.
And one point you made that I just want to emphasize, it's such a great point, is what he's been excellent at now and before, during the election in 2016, is coming up with language that carries and travels really well, especially online. But it's like memes, right? You say crooked Hillary, wow, or crazy Bernie, or Sleepy Joe. Is that the next one?
Yeah.
Anyway, so those things actually work really well because they're packages, they're containers that travel really well.
That's true.
And they kind of rile us up. They get the dopamine going in our brains where we're either like angry or like, wow, this is funny.
And also to that point, they took the term fake news and they spun it. Because fake news was supposed to be the news about the pizza, the pizza restaurant, Pizzagate, right?
Yeah, it was the disinformation campaign that was largely contributed to by the Russians. And that's. That's not Russian fear mongering. That's just all at this point universally accepted based on the intel that we have. And he took that, and this is what I'm talking about when it comes to marketing. Yes, he reappropriated it for his own purposes and is relentless with it. I hear him say fake news more than I hear any politician say anything else.
It's a powerful media strategy. You need the mouthpiece, you need the mechanism, you need the system. So I mean, maybe Trump, as Cenk thinks, is not that intelligent in and of himself, but he's the right front man for this sort of system.
And if you were a sincere person, you see, I think part of that too, but the part of the problem you're talking about, there are people who get out of what was it, McManus, who was the general who left? He was Mattis. Yeah. There are people who get to the breaking point and they go, I can't take this anymore. I'm out. Their principles come through. And if you were someone who was actually had deep principles and deep thoughts, you probably would get out. But this is, I think, it's a very on the surface kind of thing, and like you said, it's survival, and it's a game for him. And he tweets about from serious stuff all the way to silly Academy Awards or whatever. And like you said, he just wants to get all his people on and go, you see, Oprah is a bad person or whatever that he's attacking at that point.
I mean, online, some studies show that fiction outperforms reality, right? Breitbart News, which is not totally fictional, but definitely spun heavily and often untrue, was the most trafficked news source on Facebook for the 3 months before our election.
On the go? Don't worry, we got you covered. You can still listen to TYT at our new podcast network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or at tyt.com/podcast.